Now, in the recruiting process, there's a big piece of this as well, and there's two big mistakes that I see, and I'll just start with that. In no particular order, the two biggest mistakes are picking the wrong schools and starting too late. Okay, tonight we're not talking about starting too late. Okay, we're going to go ahead and just assume that everyone has started early enough. And I think just as a general rule, I think we can go ahead and talk about this because it's important for a lot of you, especially the youngsters, to know out there. The initial contact date that the NCAA has put into place, which is the first date that coaches can contact you as a player. You can reach out at any time. You could have your swing coach or someone like myself reach out even before the initial contact date, but you and your family are not restricted either. It's just that coaches cannot respond to you or your family before June 15th after sophomore year. And then along with that, just good information really quick. The first time that you can go on an official visit with a coach is August 1st, that same summer. So right before junior year or after sophomore year, that summer in between. Okay, any questions on that? Just want to make sure that was made sense to everybody. Okay. All right, so what we're talking about tonight is the first problem, right? Not being late, but picking the wrong schools. Okay. So what goes into that? Let's brainstorm. One of the main things that goes into that is your development as a player and your development as a student and your development as a person. I see great athletes that are underdeveloped academically that are not ready for college. I see great athletes that are not mature enough or ready for college. That's a big deal. Okay. A lot of those guys you see red shirt or they take an extra year gap year. Not everybody does, but I want to make sure that all of my players that I work with here at Fort College Golf are ready. Right. So that's one thing. I've seen players that are academically ready, but are nowhere near ready for the rigor of playing 36 holes, traveling with a team. Maybe they're really just individuals at the junior level, and they really haven't played high school golf or played team golf, on Team Florida or the Florida Cup. That's why the FSGA has created such cool pathways for this, is because we see it in college golf. Right. And then something that I just kind of just brushed over there was playing 36 holes. I was just at the John Haidt Invitational, HAYT, at Sawgrass Country Club last weekend before the players here in Ponte Vedra. And, those guys actually didn't play 36, but they did carry their bag every day and they played in some really blustery conditions. And the first day I counted, the wind was 25, gusting to 35 at a very hard golf course. And I counted 11 flags that were less than 6 off an edge. So college golf is just demanding from an athletic perspective. Team workouts, walking 18 holes 6 times a week, right? In season, college teams are allowed to be are allowed to have practice 6 days a week. And technically 18 holes only counts as 3 hours. So when the NCAA mandates only 20 or allows, I should say, 20 hours of practice, that's not including the extra 2 hours that junior golfers are walking the course on those 18-hole days. So keep that in mind. And not to intimidate anyone here, but at the D1 level, especially, right, it requires very good grades and very, very good golf. We typically see that 20-hour mandate be pushed closer to 35 or 40 hours as a commitment. So just a good baseline for you guys that maybe 2026, 2027 recruits, and you're just getting this information at your fingertips for the first time. It's really, really important. And then the last would be the social component to college, or the maturity side of it. And a couple of things we're going to talk about tonight, not just the maturity side, but like, what sort of community do you want? What geographically, where do you want to be in the country? What type of weather do you think will be preferable for you, right? Everybody wants warm weather, but is cold weather a deal breaker? We'll get to that. But from the social side and the maturity side, do you have the ability to say no in college? Can you manage your own time? Can you study without being distracted for lengths of time? Can you send a professor a professional email? These are all things that I work on with my guys and gals. And, when families come to me and say, Mike, what do you do? Well, yes, I'm helping narrow down the list of schools. I'm helping identify those fits after getting to know them and doing an initial consultation, watching their golf swing and seeing their demeanor and their maturity, whether it's over lunch or whether it's on the ninth hole, over a pressure putt and a Nassau, right? Whatever it may be, I'm always watching, and I'm trying to gauge where would this player be a right fit in college. So just want to kind of put that thinking cap on you guys tonight, because that's what I do here at For College Golf. And I think that's a really important way to look at narrowing down the right fit, because essentially, whether we work together or not, at some point, we're going to have to narrow down this list of schools for you guys. And not only the sooner we do it, the better, because the sooner we do it, the quicker you guys can go on campus visits, the quicker you can start reaching out to coaches, even if it's before that June 15th date, that initial contact date, in sophomore year summer, before your junior year. There's still things that we can do. So the quicker we narrow this list down, the more we can research, the better research we can do, and we can really narrow that lens to the right schools. That's what I talk about with my guys and gals quite a bit. Developing in your freshman and sophomore year cannot be understated. If you're a freshman listening tonight, pick if you're going to take anything away, take that, because your development, your experience in tournaments on the golf course, you're cutting your learning curve in half from a technical swing standpoint, and then applying those skills to tournament golf. That's what you should be really focusing on, right? And is it true that Power Five, SEC, ACC teams recruit guys even before that initial contact date? Yeah, it absolutely is true. But is that the vast majority of players? No, it's not. It's a very, very small percentage. It's 2 to 5% of players, right? So if you're one of those players, take all the advice tonight as necessary. If you're not one of those players yet, and you are earlier in the cycle, maybe you're freshman or sophomore year or even younger, make sure that you keep development as a priority. Make development the forefront, and then even if a player is a senior, that has to be first, right? Because if they're not good enough and they want to play at the Division I level, then we have to allow them the tools, resources, coaches, and numbers and facts and understanding to realize what it takes to play there. Okay, and then the growth phase that we have is more about actually diving into recruiting, growing as a person, growing as a player, meeting coaches, and also growing as a competitor during that time. And then leadership is typically after the verbal commitment has happened. All right, we won't get too much into that, but I don't know how many guys versus girls we have on here tonight, but I'm going to try to hit both sides of the coin. Obviously, my main expertise is on the men's side, but I also am starting to work with quite a few young ladies as well. First, I want to show you guys the landscape. There's 1,101 men's teams. It's an incredibly vast landscape. So truly what we're talking about tonight is we're taking those 1,101 programs and we're trying to narrow them down to 30 or 35 like that, right? A player's ranking and ability level helps. Also knowing their college preferences when it comes to their academics and how much they want to challenge themselves and where they want to go, where they can go as well. That helps. And then where they want to be geographically, weather-wise, what type of school it is. We'll get into that as well. All right, so it's just a huge landscape, guys. There's 2,700 recruits per year, about 700 playing at the D1 level. That was much smaller during COVID. It's starting to get closer back to that number again. 500 D2, 750 D3. What a lot of people don't know is Division III is almost equal to Division I in terms of number of teams. And in terms of number of players, it's actually bigger. There's more opportunity for college golf at Division III level on the men's side. But just to keep in mind, number of scholarships. These are if a program is fully funded. Many are not. My guess is about 60% programs are funded. Some programs aren't funded at all. Some programs have one scholarship, right? So these programs, if they're fully funded, which a lot of your SEC, AAC teams are, they have 4.5. So the average roster size is about 10. It actually got a little bit bigger during COVID because those seniors stuck around for an extra year. We're just seeing the tail end of that now. So just FYI, athletically, this does not pertain to academic scholarship or merit scholarships, but athletically, there's about 4.5 scholarships available at the Division I level or less. Okay, so athletically, you're looking at about a 45% scholarship if there's a 10-man team, and you're getting an equal slice of the pie, just to make it simple. All right, so huge landscape. So tonight's super important because I'm going to show you guys how to narrow it down and some thoughts to actually help do that. On the women's side, quite significantly smaller than the men's. I'm going to do my best not to compare here, but there's 884 programs, but there's a lot more scholarship to go around. Smaller teams, don't know why that is. I've gotten that question forever. But I think just typically, there's less individual play in women's golf, similar number of events, but more scholarship, and coaches like to give out more piece of the pie. So if a team's fully funded in Division I, they have 6.0 scholarships. So for those families that have guys and girls out there, don't expect as much scholarship for your young boy as you do for your girl. All right, really cool chart here, guys. This is one of my main principles I want to talk to you about before I show it to you. Huge to understand this. You have to understand this. Everything in college recruiting is on a timeline. Okay, so like I said, we're not really talking about who starts first or if we start late in the recruiting process tonight, but what we are talking about is how to narrow down your list. And if you're too late to some Division I programs, because those, I call it the domino effect, right? The bigger schools with more money at the D1 level, and then the top schools at the D2 level, they go first. Then the bottom level of Division I goes second, then Division II, then a lot of Division III, or the high academics in Division III. Sometimes they even go just as early. The higher academic schools at the Division III level go just as early in terms of making their verbal commitments from the player to the coach as Division I programs. So keep that in mind, and I'll show you guys that on my chart here in just a second. But I really want to stress this, is that if you are too late, there may be programs that have just simply already recruited and passed you by. We have to get over that. I don't work with many of those players late in the game. I'll probably take on 3 or 4 a year, players that I think can really use my help and typically need my help at that point. Those are fun projects for me. But that's why we do these webinars, is so you guys can understand when to start and actually get going early and have good information at your fingertips in order to do so. All right, so how early? These elite top 15 programs at Division I level, these teams are committing players as early as July after sophomore year. Okay, some even in June, right? The first date is June 15th, but a lot of those commitments don't happen until mid-July or so. And remember what we said, visits can't happen until August 1st. So a lot of these normal commitments are happening in September at the very, very top level, and then some as late as June the next summer. You can think about it this way as well. This is a good information to have. The early commitments typically have more scholarship as well, and the later commitments typically have less. Okay, not always true, not a hard and fast rule for everyone, but just a good rule of thumb to keep in mind. All right, and then the action phase, this is a good definition for you guys to remember. June 15th until signing day, there's 17 months in between that, and that's what this chart on the right is illustrating. The first month after the contact date, all the way until about upper level Division II, your 40th or 50th ranked programs. Those are the ones committing guys right before signing day. All right, and then some programs even do it later than that. So if you're a senior and you haven't committed yet, don't worry. You obviously got to get moving, and that's an understatement. But there are players that commit Division III, NAI, and junior college level as late as late spring in their senior year. Okay, so late is a relative term, right? When families ask me like, how late is too late? It just depends. It depends on your athletic level. Depends on what you're looking for. All right, I want to talk about development just for a second before we go into actually narrowing down the school list. If you're in 10th grade, that's this chart on the left. 12th grade is on the right. This is illustrating development over time from junior golf scoreboard. Okay, and I've actually broken it down to plus handicap, normal, regular 4 handicap, and also scoring average. So your elite players going to these schools in 10th grade are shooting about 70 to 72 in tournaments. Typically, if they're shooting around 70, they're playing, half easier events, half higher level national events or invitationals, or they're just a top 10 player in the country, right? And their handicap is between a +4 and a +2. Pretty darn impressive in 10th grade, right? And that's middle of 10th grade. And then by the time they're a senior and they verbally committed fall their senior year, they're about a +5 handicap at the elite level, almost a 6 +6 handicap. And in order to play at the Power 5 level, about a +3 handicap. All right, pretty cool chart to show you guys. Now, before you guys tear me apart for this, these are old scoring differentials from Junior Golf Scoreboard. The #1 ranked player now on Junior Golf Scoreboard is about a -8 or 9. I think on the women's side, it's even more. I like using the old because the old is using, for boys, a course length of 6850 and a course rating of 72. And if you know Junior Golf Scoreboard, they take like a 0.0, this 250th ranked player, shoots about even par on a 6,800, course rating of 72, 75% of the time. Okay, so that's your 250 ranked player in the country. Their scoring average is not 72, it's about 73.6. Okay, your scoring average is very likely higher than you think it is in tournaments. Okay, I get a lot of guys that say, oh, my scoring average is 74, when in reality, it's like 76.5. It's a huge difference. Look at this chart. Division I threshold, anywhere from 69.1 down to comfortably about 74.4, sometimes even about 75.1, as you can see with the highlighted here. Division II, those players can be up here, but typically not. A lot of those are shooting 72.6 by the time their senior year comes, all the way down to 76.1. Okay, so if you're not averaging at least 75.1 to 76.1, you're not looking at the Division I level for men. Okay, girls, I'll have to get those numbers for you. I'm working on a similar chart for that, but it's typically about 2 shots higher for women. And as a good rule of thumb, it's about 2 shots higher or 2 shots lower in college golf. So let me explain what that actually means. So in college golf, if let's say I'm shooting 74.4 in junior golf, I'm typically going to be shooting 76.4 in college golf if I went next year. Okay, college golf is just that much more demanding. There's so many reasons why, right? Like a demanding school schedule, first time away from home, just playing harder golf courses, harder conditions, and any type of weather. Just trust me on that. We've crunched these numbers for a long, long time. So do not compare the stats you see on the website for 14 tournaments and 4 players to what you're shooting at hurricane level tournaments, right? Those courses are much, much easier. You're selecting them, you're playing practice rounds on your own, doing your own thing, however you want to do it. You don't get the opportunity to do that in college. Coach tells you where to play, and you go to those tournaments when you qualify, right? I'm making it sound like it's a bad thing. It's a beautiful thing. College golf is the best experience of my life. But I just want you guys to be aware that it is much, much more challenging than in many cases in junior golf. Okay, so those are your thresholds. You guys have any questions about that? I'm just going to dive into the recruiting process real quick. We did discuss this on a prior webinar, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But what we're talking about today, we have 4 phases that I believe in: the research phase, the outreach phase, the exploration phase, and the decision phase. What we're talking about tonight is the research phase. If we don't research, we don't have our college preferences correct, then we cannot be successful. We will be, we might be thinking we're shooting fish in a barrel. Oh, I'm going to get a bunch of responses from coaches. I'm going to pick up traction. They're going to call me back. But if we don't have the right schools and a good mix of reach, target, and safety schools, there's no way we're going to be successful right away in the college recruiting process. All right. So the reason I wanted to bring this up is because I believe there's 4 pillars when it comes to actually writing down and making your college preferences. The 4 pillars are this: academic, athletic, social, not just party schools and things like that. When I say social, I'm talking about the surrounding community, the on-campus setting, the school spirit, location, weather, climate. You guys can read obviously off the slide here. But what is the school truly like outside of academics and outside of the sport of golf? Okay, super, super important. This list could go on and on. That's why I left a comma there, because there are so many more things that you can add. Right? Dorms, food, diversity, safety, location, weather, facilities, like so much. I guess technically facilities you would put under athletic, but we could also be talking training facilities, workout facilities, all these other things. Even just like the library might be something that could sway your decision one way or the other. Right? The rec center, the off-campus housing, whatever that may be socially. Those are things that I really want my players and encourage my players to go explore, even online, before they get the chance to put their boots on the ground, as we say, and do campus visits, whether it's with a coach or without a coach, unofficial or official visit, whatever it may be. And then the fourth pillar being the financial piece. One of the biggest questions I ask families when it comes to the financial piece, especially at the top end, is, can you afford $35,000 per year? And that might be like a whoa to a lot of you guys out there. That's expensive. Okay. But keep in mind, schools like Georgetown, Notre Dame, Emory, Carnegie Mellon, just great, Wash U, University of Illinois, like any really good academic school that has a high value is going to have a sticker price of anywhere from 55 to $85,000 now. I think Georgetown topped out at 89 this year. Okay, so when I ask the question to families, is $35,000 a deal breaker? That's typically asking at the top end for those private schools, with or without athletic and an athletic scholarship. All right, it just depends on how you divvy that out. I might have a player get zero athletic scholarship, but they have really good grades and they apply to a school that's, I don't know, 30% acceptance rate, right? When the national average acceptance rate is 62%, it's a highly selective school. It's not an Ivy League down in the 5 to 10% range. And I think Harvard's even down to like 3.5 or 4% nowadays. But 30% is pretty darn selective. And if you have good enough grades to apply there and get some academic money, you could see as much as I've had players get $25,000 to $45,000 academic money. So it does cut off that cost. And then there are many schools. This is a good question for coaches if you're in the middle of the process. Coach, can we stack athletic aid with academic aid, right? Or merit aid? Okay. And if your family needs it, it could be financial aid or FAFSA. It could be CSS profile. It just depends on what the school uses to divvy out their aid, or it could be something like a government Pell Grant or something like that. Okay, so definitely, I'm never short on recommending my families that I work with and families like yours that are listening in tonight, to search high and dry, ask as many questions as you can when it comes to stacking scholarships and which ones are available academically, athletically, or even outside of both those realms. Okay. But that's on the top end, is 35,000 financially. And then, if a player comes to me and says, Mike, I don't have any funds, I'm paying for college, I have to go to school for free. Does that limit us? Yes, it absolutely does limit us. College is expensive nowadays. But at the same time, if a player tells me that, then we can start looking, oh, should I go play at the junior college level for 2 years to make it more cost effective, and then potentially transfer to a Division I institution? Right? I would never go and tell a player to go to a cheap D1 school and then transfer to another D1 school. Is it possible? Sure. But I think there are very, very good routes at the NAIA level and the junior college level, for families that need to make it more affordable. Okay, so that's kind of both ends of the spectrum when it comes to that fourth pillar, the financial piece of that. All right, let's talk about the first couple pillars. Let's talk about the athletic side. All right, when it comes to the athletic side, I think the biggest questions are, where can I play as a freshman? That's huge for me. Whenever a family comes to me and says, Mike, I'm okay with redshirting, or I just want to carry a bag, that's a huge red flag for me. That tells me that player doesn't really want to play in college. Huge red flag. Okay, so I don't want to, I really wouldn't like to hear that if I'm a coach, and I certainly don't like to hear that in my own business. So your ability to play as a freshman. Here's a really good general rule of thumb, probably one of the best snippets of information I'm going to give you guys tonight, is take your junior golf scoreboard class ranking, especially if you've played enough. If you've only played 4 or 5, it's not a good enough sample size for coaches or yourself to do this. If you've played 15 or 20, I would actually give yourself a bump, because typically that actually hurts you in the rankings. Okay, but here's the piece of advice that I have. Take your class ranking, divide it by 3. So if I'm ranked 300 in my class, which is pretty close to where I was ranked, then I should not be looking at schools inside of the top 100 in Division One. Okay, I should be looking at schools outside of that level. All right, if I have a few dream schools, if I have a few schools that are local or even regional to me, where I've already made a connection with the coach at a camp, or I've already gone out and visited them when they were playing a tournament. I'm not saying this is a hard and fast rule for every school on your list, but I'm saying if we're making a list of 30 to 35 schools and you're ranked 300 in your class and you put only schools in the top 100 on, you are not going to see as much success reaching out to those coaches as you potentially could be by being realistic with yourself. All right, so that's the hardest thing I have to say tonight, but it's the most honest thing I have to say tonight, is you've got to be realistic based on where you're at. Okay, if you're young and you have incredible upside, right? You got to be honest with yourself, right? Are you a short hitter? Are your grades not up to par? Right? If you don't have a 3.2 or 3.3 GPA for guys, for girls, it'd be like 3.5 or 3.6. Typically, girls are just more academic, especially girls that are going to be student athletes. It's just what I've seen. I have a ton of girls that have 4.0s. I don't have that many guys that have 4.0s that want to play college golf. But if you don't have a 3.2 and you're a young man, then I wouldn't be stacking your list with schools that have an SAT benchmark of 1,200, 1,300 on the low end, and that have an admissions rate of less than 20%. I think that would be silly, right? And especially schools in the Northeast that require a very, very high level of academics, right? Real quick, I want to show you guys, I know I mentioned it, so I'm going to go ahead and bring it up here. I'm going to show you guys the men's school database. All right, so just for an example, let's say, all right, I am looking at the Division I level because I'm a 300th ranked player. I'm going to go ahead and only choose schools outside of 75th in the country. I'm going to sort those. This would be a pretty cool resource, right, guys? If I gave this to the FSGA. These are just team rankings over the years. I could probably hide those to make things simpler. So now we're looking at schools like, a lot of them, I call these mid-major programs, right? You got some ACC, Big 12, Pac-12. You still have a couple down here, but these are typically the less competitive Power 5 schools. All right, now let's say I'm looking high academic. Let's say I am looking high academic. I'm going to flip that in just a second. We're going to go greater than 1,100 on the SAT. Okay, and then I could even sort by acceptance rate. So there's some really good schools that even have acceptance rates, like Santa Clara University, in the 50% range, right? But then there you go. You have the University of Michigan, especially because they just had a huge year in football. I guarantee that acceptance rate is going to go down because they're going to get a ton of applications. They can only take the same amount of students. Therefore, the acceptance rate is going to fall, right? That's typically why you see those big state schools so low. And then you have some Ivy Leagues here, obviously in the single digits. But guys, this is something I've created over the last 10 years. It's been an incredible resource for me and the players I work with. I will do my best to create a modified version of this and give you guys everything I can. I can't share, the coach information and cell phone numbers and all that right at your fingertips, like I do for my players. But I can certainly share rankings over the years and things like that that I think will be really helpful, and then conferences as well. That's one of the biggest things I'll say while we're talking about narrowing college preferences on the athletic side is if you know you're looking at a couple teams in a conference, make sure you've checked off the boxes the other teams in that conference. There's a couple reasons. It's very likely that those schools are similar. And once you get into the recruiting process, if you've got two of those schools interested and the other school might be higher ranked or better, you can use those other schools as leverage and get your foot in the door with that third school. Okay, I'm not saying play a game. I'm not saying bribe a coach with another offer. I'm not saying do that. Certainly not. But you could tell him that you're narrowing down your options, him or her, that you're narrowing down your options in the recruiting process, that you're speaking with this school and that school, and especially if they ask, tell them, and then give them 3 reasons, X, Y, Z, why you're interested in them or their school or their program. Okay, that's a communication tactic. That's advice there, but super, super important to also look at the conferences on your personal database. And here's what I do for my players. I take the names that I pull from the full database, and then I create them a personal database here. All right. If I get the chance tonight, I'll show you guys an example of that. We color code them. We are very active in making sure that those stay organized and that we have recruiting notes for each and every school that we're speaking with once we start the recruiting process. Okay. So that's just a good example of how to do that. And then you can even sort by size of school. You can go in and look at, all right, if I am looking high academic, I'm going to look at Division II and Division III programs. I'm going to sort by the highest academics possible. And let's just see what names we come up with in Division II and Division III. Wesleyan, Amherst, Hamilton, Tufts. Any of you guys that know the Northeast, you'll be very familiar with these names. Some of the best academic schools in the whole country at the D2 and D3 level, especially D3 level, are in the Northeast. Quite a few of them here, right? And then if we go Division I only, and we look at those high academic names, they will be names that I certainly guarantee you guys all know. Yale, Harvard, Rice, Princeton, Dartmouth, Columbia, Penn, Michigan, Cornell, Georgetown. Yep, and these are also the most expensive schools. So if you are, that's good advice. If you are looking for high academics, make sure you can afford it, or make sure that you are asking good questions about academic aid, asking to do what's called an academic pre-read with the coach. That's special treatment where they'll take your high school transcript, bring it to admissions, and see if you can get in. If you're on their short list, they should be able to do that, especially by the end of junior year. Okay, once you have those junior year grades in. All right. So back to the main conversation here, guys. Just a couple more minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions. When we're thinking about those 4 pillars and our college preferences, right? Just to close the door on the athletic side, we're talking about roster spots. How many, if you're a junior in high school, look at how many juniors are on the team, because those are the players that you're going to be replacing. And then you can also, if the team's got 15 guys on it, your playing time will likely be diminished. If the team's got 8 guys on it, it's very, very plausible that if you're good enough to make that top 5 right away, you can go in and play as a freshman. And that's a really, really good thing that I look for my players. Is typically smaller team sizes, not too small, not 7, 8, but if a team's 10 or less, it's typically a good thing for them. Right. And what we've seen during COVID, just to touch on this for 1 second, these rosters at University of Florida, Tennessee, they were huge. They were up to like 15, 16 guys, which is really abnormal because you saw the average at 9.8 on my other chart. So now they're coming back down because a lot of these 5th-year seniors are leaving. The transfer portal is calming down. It's a good sign for you junior golfers out there as well, because coaches are still used to having those larger roster sizes, but they are trying to get it smaller. So logical thinking would say, well, Mike, why is that a good thing? Well, because they're still having 12 or 13 guys on the team, but they're not expanding it to 15, 16 like it was a couple of years ago. All right. And then just to close the door on the athletic side, you got to dive in and say, do I want a super hands-on coach, or do I want someone that's really just a raw motivational leader, right? And there's good coaches and bad coaches on both sides, right? JC Deacon at University of Florida, not a super hands-on guy. He's a player himself. He will dive into that, but he's more of a motivational guy, more of a leader from a vocal standpoint, right? And then you got Bryce Waller at University of Central Florida. He's a super golf nerd, likes to dig in with players, likes to set up drills and games and do a bunch of stuff in practice with them and understand day to day, minute to minute, exactly what they're doing. So you got to ask yourself which type of coach is right for me. And those are typically two good examples of coach types that I've seen over the years. Ask yourself, what's the team atmosphere that I want? Is it a close-knit team atmosphere? Big team, small team? That's another thing. Do they have a strong tournament schedule? Do they have the on-campus and off-campus facilities that I'm looking for? If it's in a cold weather, now this is a social preference, cold weather, but if the school's in cold weather, do they have the facilities needed to get work in the winter, or is that something where they just shut it down, or do they travel? Maybe they do winter travel. Don't rule that out. That's another thing I've seen is like when people say cold weather is a deal breaker, especially us as Floridians. I did that myself, and I ended up at James Madison. And sure enough, we traveled south every spring, and we also had a great indoor facility with TrackMan and tons of hitting bays and cameras and club room and awesome stuff. And we worked out and we got after it. So it was a ton of fun. Switching gears to the academic side. Okay, this pillar is really important. I think the biggest thing is big school, small school. Probably not what a lot of you guys were expecting. Obviously we have to pick a place where you can get in with your grades and understanding the admissions rate of the school, but also am I picky on what major I want to, if I have to be an engineering major, if I want to go pre-med and study biology, that's going to be something that really cuts that list of schools down from 35 to 25 super quick. Okay, so you got to be honest with yourself there. And if you don't know, keep your options open, right? If you just want to study business, don't narrow yourself down to the schools that only have finance. Explore those business schools first. They might have something like economics. They might have two different micro and macro classes that you can take as a freshman and really start to feel what you and get a good experience of what you want to do. Maybe it's something more in the markets or trading. Might be more in marketing instead of something in finance. So who knows? But that's just an example when it comes to finding the degree that you want and the majors offered at the program or at the school. And then going back to what I mentioned earlier, the class size and the school size. Typically, bigger schools have bigger classes, right? Not rocket science here, guys. Not always true, but the best student to faculty ratio, not class size, but student to faculty ratio that was studied. I forget who came out with this, like Harvard Business Journal or I forgot, but they said 16 to 1. So typically what that means from a student to faculty standpoint is that your classes are about 22 students large. Okay. And they just say that's best for learning, right? That doesn't mean that's best for you. That just means that that's typically best in terms of acquiring information and studying in groups and just getting things done. Now, as freshmen, especially at a lot of these larger state schools, we'll have lecture halls where there's 200, 300, 400, 500 people large. So if that's something you think really would overwhelm you, not only from an academic perspective, like not being able to attend class and really truly like lock in and focus, but also from just a larger campus or social experience standpoint, what I would highly recommend you do is start looking at schools that are more in that mid-range, like 10 to 12,000 or even less than 8,000. I would categorize like a small school as less than like 4,000, and then like a mid-sized school anywhere from 6 to 12,000. And then anything larger than 12,000 is typically a larger school. But University of Central Florida, it's a commuter school. There's quite a few people that live off campus. Doesn't feel this big, but there's about 58,000 students there now. It's crazy how many attend there. And schools like Michigan State, University of Florida, same thing. So keep in mind that you can narrow down your list and your college preferences pretty quickly just by asking yourself, am I overwhelmed by big crowds and a lot of people, or is that something that I can actually embrace? And some people just really prefer more intimate social settings, getting to know a small group of people, and they're honest with themselves, and they actually learn better that way, and they're happier in those type of environments. So that's really what we're talking about here tonight, guys and gals. It's, where do you think you'll be happiest? From the social perspective, this is super, super important. This is typically where I find that most of my guys and girls end up making their final college decision is based on these things. Okay, couple things. Location, not just warm weather, cold weather, north, south, but also east, west. How far from home do I want to be? What's acceptable, right? Student life or community. And that could go both ways. The student life, I mean, like the school spirit. What does it feel like on campus? What's the vibe? What's it like? What's it truly like when I put my boots on the ground and walk around? It's really hard to get an idea of student life unless you actually step foot on campus. There's great videos on YouTube. There's great things out there. You can talk to third-party references. Those are all other great ways to do it, but you have to step foot on campus, especially if that school's on your short list. Okay. Um, and then the community, the larger community would be, okay, is this a small school in the middle of a big, big city? Like, um, just thinking like Rollins College in Orlando, right? Super small school. Winter Park's an incredibly busy area. Orlando's a huge town, right? So you got to ask yourself, like, what if I took, maybe I went to a North Texas, which is a massive school, I think 28,000 students, but it's quite far out. It's just outside of Fort Worth, but it's considerably away from any big city, like 10 miles or so, I believe. Don't fact check me on that, but I think that's true. I went there back in 2021. So ask yourself, is it truly just a bigger school that I'm wanting or a smaller school? Or is it also the surrounding town? And then one thing that's quite interesting that I also found out is that you have private schools with really open, flowing, touristy campuses that don't feel private, right? And then you have public schools with very confined boundaries and very, fenced in campuses that feel private. So you have to ask yourself, don't just look at, in-state versus out-of-state tuition, and if they're the same, then okay, the school's private. Don't just assume like, okay, the school's private, I'm going to love it because I want a more private feel. You actually have to look at what that campus setting is, and how students interact with the surrounding town. What type of school spirit they have. What do they do on Friday nights typically? Those are all great things to learn from a coach or even one of the players on the team if you have the chance to ask. And then, guys, I cannot stress this enough. Put your boots on the ground. Go dive into things like food on campus, what kind of dining halls they have, what extracurriculars are there on campus that you can do. Is the school safe? Is the school diverse? Are the demographics of the students there like me, right? Is it a place where I can see myself being happy and successful? At the end of the day, that is huge. It's not just the size of the town, the community, the surrounding area, the weather. It's, are these people similar to me enough to where I could feel comfortable freshman year fitting in and being happy and successful, right? And to some extent in college, we have to open up. We are going to see diversity, and we're going to have to be inclusive, and all those terms that we're talking about these days, right? But at the same time, you have to go to a place where you're comfortable. Okay. College is a place where everybody's gonna, shed their skin and flap their wings and fly. But you have to be happy, and you have to be in a place where you can perform at your best athletically and academically in order to do so. Okay. And here's my best advice. I'll wrap up by saying this, guys. And sorry, I talked a little bit longer than I planned on tonight, but I will wrap up before we go to questions here by saying this. When it comes to narrowing your focus in the college recruiting process, you first have to ask yourself, how much time do I have? Am I before that June 15 contact date, or am I after? If you're after, your list might have to be a slightly smaller or more compact than if you still have more time, right? Then start building out your athletic preferences. What type of coach do you want? How good am I? From a ranking perspective, divide your class ranking by 3, look at schools outside of that number, like we said, right? Start researching which rosters have 10, 12, 13 guys on their roster, on their team, sorry, and how many are juniors like me, right? If there's 5 juniors on the team and you know that they're all leaving in 2 years, that's a great opportunity for you to send a coach an email, pursue them over the phone as well, and then start the communication cycle in the recruiting process. All right. And then at the end of the day, right, I don't want to skip over financial. Financial is a big piece. Make sure to talk to mom and dad about that. Mom and dad, make sure to be honest with your kids about if you're paying, and if you are, what you can afford. I've seen a lot of really, really wealthy, affluent families that tell their son or daughter, money matters. Let's get as much as we can, and they end up making the wrong decision because they think money's too important. At the end of the day, you're going to get what you pay for, right? In anything. Typically, higher value colleges are ones with higher academics and higher price tags. So keep that in mind. And then the last thing I'll say and wrap up with is make sure that your social preferences are built out, right? Geographically, warm weather, cold weather, type of school, size of classes, food, safety, things to do in the community, the surrounding area, and then all things when it comes to being a student. Okay. Put those all together, create a great list for yourself of reach, target, and safety schools, and best of luck in the recruiting process.